Okay, so as I was saying, I was just talking about the rules book. Along with some alternative character races, there's also additional character classes, and some traditional classes that have different spins on them because the setting is so different. One example of a new class for Dark Sun is the Gladiator. Slavery being very prevalent, it's not uncommon for the Dragon Kings especially, in an attempt to, as the old saying goes, to appease the masses with bread and circuses. It's not uncommon for Dragon Kings in the various scattered city-states, which are basically just kind of little city-sized kingdoms that the Dragon Kings have carved out for themselves. That there will be large gladiatorial arenas that host these epic contests between men or between men and beasts, and that sort of thing. And so naturally it would appeal to players to play one of these gladiators. So gladiator is a player character class. Because there is such a stigma against magic, magic isn't necessarily non-playable in Dark Sun. You can still play wizards. In fact, there are kind of two varieties of wizards that you have to decide, how you want to approach playing your wizard on Athos, and that is playing as a defiler, who is basically a wizard who has no regard for the people and the life that he's harming by using his magic, and he basically will freely draw that magical energy, that life force, to power his spells. And so I hesitate to use the term evil, but I mean essentially he is basically a magic user who is of no moral compunction. He is basically in it for the power, and he will do whatever it takes to give him the most power. But there are also wizards that call themselves preservers, and the preservers basically are much more careful. Now, they are handicapped to a slight extent because they only draw as much energy, as much life force as they need to cast their magic, and they're very careful to kind of try to maintain a balance. And in fact, the preservers, as a semi-political faction, if you would call them that, are dedicated to trying to help Athos recover. They haven't completely given up on the idea, or completely given up on the fate of the world. They believe that there's the potential to turn things around, that the forests can return, that the rivers can flow again, and that they basically have to fight this war against these defiler wizards in order to restore balance. And so basically that's two different options for playing wizards. The gods have abandoned Athos. There is basically no divine intervention in the world anymore. The gods, for whatever reason, which is not really known to anybody in the world, they basically do not exert any influence anymore, and it seems like they have lost all interest in the people and the world of Athos. And so there are no true clerics anymore. There are no true paladins. In fact, I don't think paladin is actually a class that you can play. You can play clerics that worship the elements, basically the four basic elements, fire, air, water, and earth. And there's an even subset of clerics that worship the para-elements, which are, I don't recall all of them offhand, but basically they're the half steps between two of the elements. I think magma, silt, I forget the other two. But basically, so there's kind of 8 different varieties of clerics, but the only clerical magic is really kind of an elemental magic, because there's no gods. There's no gods that answer their worshippers anymore. The only gods that answer their worshippers are the dragon kings, and the dragon kings have devoted followers, basically their own clerics called Templars, and the dragon kings are so powerful that essentially they can grant their Templars divine magic. Templars are a playable character class in Dark Sun if you want to play one. They generally are the bad guys because they work for the Sorcerer Kings, but they have basically clerical magic. Excuse me. They can heal and that sort of thing, but you know, if you're role-playing one out, one who is actually devoted to a Dragon King and therefore, you know, getting the drawing the magic from, you know, from that source, you're generally not going to be a very nice guy, because the Dragon Kings aren't very nice people. But psionics, one particular angle for Dark Sun that's important to mention is that because magic is so has had such an impact on the world, and because it's so shunned, because mages have to be so careful about going about their business, or, you know, basically being hunted down and killed. Consequently, there was kind of a backlash in the dichotomy of the world against magic as a general power source. The other point being that there's not a whole lot of life energy left to kind of fuel a lot of this magic anymore. So the entire world has kind of fallen towards psionics, and in fact even a lot of the natural creatures, even plants, just evolve psionic powers as defense mechanisms, or, you know, survival capabilities. And so even your characters, even your PCs will generally be, even if they're not actual psionic classed characters, they will generally be wild talents with at least one or more minor psionic powers. Second edition psionics being what it was occasionally a little awkward and clumsy and complicated, but not terribly so in my opinion. I never had a great deal of problem with it, though granted I probably didn't play 100% by the rules. We probably kind of fudged our way through a lot of it. But one of the interesting things is that the Dark Sun box set, knowing that psionics is a very prevalent element of the setting and of the system, they actually thought to include an errata sheet. Here, let me see if I can show it to you. In the boxed set itself, the Complete Psionics Handbook errata. And so it is definitely virtually, it pretty much is required that you have the Psionics Handbook, the second edition Psionics Handbook, to play in this setting, because you'll need to know that for the wild talent powers, for a lot of the powers of different monsters and that sort of thing. But personally, I think Psionics is interesting. I think second edition Psionics was different enough and flavorful enough that it made sense to me, at least it made sense why they would include an entire kind of separate rule set for psionics, because it was a very different set of powers than magic was. And that was my main disappointment with psionics in third edition, was it just basically it felt like another flavor of magic. It wasn't that different. It didn't feel like psionics, it just felt like I'm a mage who casts from, you know, this nebulous, you know, space in my own psyche. And so that's neither here nor there. But the box set includes a very novel thing for people who remember box sets and that sort of thing from that era of gaming. It includes flip books. It includes a Dungeon Master's flip book and a Player's Aid Cards flip book for the included adventure, which is called Little Knowledge, I think, which is a pretty challenging adventure, actually. I played through it a couple of years ago by another DM, and none of us had died by the time we had gotten through the adventure, but we didn't fare very well. We were constantly kind of getting whooped on by creatures in the environment, by bandits, and we were always scrambling to try and keep enough food and water to keep us going, and you know, it seemed like around every corner there was always something that was trying to eat us or trying to rob us blind. It was a lot of fun, but that's what you should expect in Dark Sun, is that basically day-to-day life is a struggle. And you know, as one of the books I believe says, there are no commoners in Dark Sun, because a common person would basically, you know, perish very quickly. So only exceptional people survive. I highly recommend this game. If you can get a hold of it, usually you can find it fairly cheaply if you're keeping your eyes open on eBay or on Amazon Marketplace. Not terribly difficult to get a hold of and not terribly expensive, but a lot of fun. It's a very different setting, very refreshingly unique. One of the only ways that I would actually actively, or I would be actively interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons to this day, because I'm so burnt out on kind of the stereotyped D&D Tolkien setting. So, highest recommendations from me. Great game. Check it out.